Well, that was a football game in Atlanta, Georgia on Saturday, October 11th. Appalachian State 41, Georgia State 20. Full disclosure, just it made sense for us to record this after the game. We were recording this about less than 2 hours since the game went final. This was planned ahead of time, but it might make for better or worse that now we are doing very much in the immediate reaction of what was a thoroughly disappointing outcome for Georgia State, not in just the final score, but the way it played out. They're down 7-0 for a good bit of the game, and then things get out of hand, and over the course of the second, third quarter, it balloons to a 24-0 lead. And from that point, feels over. Obviously, a lot of the things that have plagued this team still plague them, as let me go ahead and pull up the final stats for this game, just so everyone can kind of see how it went down. If you
yeah, let's look at those final stats.
Here's the truth of it. Here's the first place thing to mention. Yes, game script had a lot to do with Georgia State having more success in the second half, and so when you look at the total yards, and it's 435 for App State, 357 for Georgia State. That's really not. That is not indicative of a 21-point loss like this. Also speaking to, I think there's a world where this doesn't get out of hand like this, but Appalachian State does edge Georgia State in passing yards, 311 to 303. More success on the ground, 124 on the ground versus Georgia State's 54. 3.4 yards carry, so, I mean, we can get into it, but some of the storylines we thought were going to be storylines weren't. And I thought that Georgia State missing defensive linemen didn't really have that much of an effect, especially as far as defending against the run. But the quarterback thing has lingered. Obviously, you see in the stats, split time. 61 passes, which, gun to my head, I feel like Nick Arbuckle would have been the last time a Georgia State quarterback would have been in the game, and there were 60-plus passing attempts. Maybe a Connor Manning game here and there, but, it's been a while. I haven't done the numbers on that yet, like I said, right in the moment. I have to imagine that's the most pass attempts in a single game in a while for this team. TJ Finley starts, kind of the same thing as usual, where he does 2 series, Cam gets 2 series. He ends the game 13 of 26, 91 yards, and his last play was an interception in the second half that kind of started to set App State on their way. Cameron Brown gets the end of the game, has a good second half. Removing the game script of it, he played well, made some nice throws. The one interception he threw that was returned for a touchdown came back on a roughing the passer, so you get to erase that one, not in the stat sheet. He's 19 of 35, 12 yards.
Really quickly, that I don't know that I would put that interception on him. I think Amos ran the wrong route.
Yeah, whatever. Clearly, it was not where the throw needed to go. But he had the 2 interceptions, running through more of the statistics, just because, worth shouting out some guys who did play well. Not going to turn this into just like everyone's team is bad, like the players suck. Like, players were out there trying. Like, the players the one who turned that from what looked like it was going to be like an absolute embarrassment. I guess you should say it got to 31-0 before the shutout ended. So they did get it plus 30 when it was really looking like it could look like the Ole Miss, the Vanderbilt games, even though this is a Sun Belt game. But Ted Hurst, 9 catches, 105 yards. Javon Robinson, 9 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. Lane Waddle off the bench, 2 catches, 33 yards. And then also Grant Hollier, 2 catches, 28 with a touchdown. So a couple of young tight ends making plays. That's partly because Camden Overton Howard left the game very early on. Looked like a pretty nasty injury. Was ruled out for the rest of the game. We'll wait to hear what happens with that. And then on the other side, J.J. Cole for Appalachian State, 21 of 32 for 309 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's 66% completion percentage. And then Rashad Dubinion, we talked about it. Sunbelt's leading rusher coming in. Actually not the leading rusher in this game for the App State Mountaineers. Lewis had the touchdown for them and also 57 yards, just edging him out by a single yard. That's kind of the numbers of it. Obviously, I think the final score ended up looking a lot nicer than it should have, and some of that is just kind of App State managing the game once they had it under control. Some of that was Georgia State did start playing better, but I mean, there's no other place to start than the offense. still not running the ball. The 54 is like that's hang the banner compared to the 30s that you've been in, and just like clearly it's an obstacle for this offense. And I think TJ Finley did play his worst game since he has come to Georgia State. Obviously, the numbers kind of bear that out. He missed some throws. Even early, like the first drive, they go down first and 10 at the 11 or thereabouts. A couple of end zone shots for Ted Hurst, both of them sailed. The third one was a drop by Ted Hurst, but over the balance of the game, he kind of made up for that. It's like you got to account for your best player is going to be allowed to have one drop of a touchdown catch, and that was the case there for Ted. But the thing of it is, and I guess I didn't make this point in exactly this way on the pod, but this is where my head was at with it, and this is where I asked Dell McGee after the game about it. It's like it isn't even really about TJ Finley in the sense of like what he does well and what we saw Cam Brown do well in the second half just are not the same game plan. As soon as Cameron Brown comes in, they're doing designed rollouts and cutting the field in half, letting him work through his options, and he can run off of that if he wants to. That's not in the playbook for when TJ's in the game, and that's, that shouldn't be. It's not his skill set, but it's just, it feels like you're asking way too much of your offensive personnel when you are having kind of two game plans. And I just don't think this team has got enough of an identity offensively, which is part of why they're struggling, because they haven't settled on a quarterback and which quarterback they're going to lean on as far as what their skills are. And so, like, yes, TJ Finley was not playing well. You should have gone to Cam Brown in this game. Certainly can make the case that if you go to him a couple weeks ago and just kind of get more comfortable in that version of the offense, that things could be better at this point. And so it's a missed opportunity for the coaching staff from that point of view. But, like, it really is just a thing where it's just like you got to pick. Like, that's why I was trying to say on past spots, like, you got to pick, because it's just kind of like there's no cohesive idea of what they're trying to do, how they're trying to beat these teams. And it was very clear by the end of the first half going into the second half that App State really started to key out on what they were trying to do and getting those short passes and attacking those screens. And they get the pick off TJ Finley because it's a quick pass to Ted Hurst, and guy had his eyes up in the right place. Like, probably knew where the ball was going on that third down.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. And sticking with the quarterbacks, I mean, it's just, I don't know that this team is good enough to do what they're doing. And we just watched the 6th game of them doing it. And I guess my frustration watching this is it's looked the exact same every single time. Like it's not like they're, hitting on some plays, and yes, they have had some success in certain areas, but the struggles have still manifested in ways that are the exact same that it's been all season, specifically with the passing game. I mean, even if you completely remove the running game, teams know that the only way Georgia State can move the ball is through the air. Okay. But then, like you said, it's like they're forcing the quarterbacks to run different offenses to their skill set, which is fine, but I don't even think that Georgia State has the skill position players to make that work. They definitely don't have the offensive line to make that work. And when teams don't have to honor the running game, they can just sit in a way that allows them to make it so they're just always defending passes, or you're usually putting the ball in traffic. And that's really the frustration with watching the offense right now, because you can't tell what they do best. You can't tell me that they do one specific thing well, because I don't know what they do specifically well. The 303 passing yards, yeah, that number is great, but then you watch the game and realize that, okay, a lot of those came in the second half, but also they're moving the ball effectively when teams have already kind of put the game, I don't want to say out of reach, but less in the balance. They had 87 passing yards in the first half. Most of those 300 yards were in the second half. And, you could sit there and say that, all right, Brown was the better guy. And yeah, that's true. I'm not going to sit here and just pile on Finley because we've seen the reverse. We've seen where he's had some better games and the offense still didn't do anything.
To your point, this is kind of what the 2015 Georgia State offense did. They had just as bad of a run game. I'm sure by the numbers after this game, the numbers are about similar. Like 2015 and 2016 were particularly low points for rushing the ball into Georgia State until now. They had Penny Hart and Robert Davis and Donovan Harden. And Yeah, they had guys like Kyler Neal that just like occasionally they could get you a nice run. And Nick Arbuckle, it's like, this is not a diss on TJ Finley. Nick Arbuckle was a very good college quarterback, and TJ Finley has not been playing as well as Nick Arbuckle was during those years. So, like, you can do it that way, but you've got to have the horses, and you've got to commit to it. And that's why I also say, like, if you're going to do that type of offense and just say we can't run the ball, then just say we're starting Finley and just roll with it and give all of the reps to that offense. I'm not saying that's what I would do, but if I were going to do something, it would be to decide. And it just feels like having been in this middle where you're trying to keep everyone happy, where you're trying to use both quarterbacks for what they're good at, it has left the offense in an impossible middle where they're not good at any particular thing, like you were just saying.
And that's the frustration because, I don't know that teams have respected what Georgia State can do offensively. Because, yeah, of course they can do something. But, as I was sitting there at halftime, I was just thinking back. At the time, they hadn't scored in their last 5 quarters of football. Clearly something is not working. And I know that part of that something is the running game. And I'll pivot here just because, it's really tough. I don't think Georgia State has bad running backs. I really don't. I really think that there is talent in the running back room. I just think that they are not allowing themselves to get into it because the offensive line struggled again. And I don't know what to do and how to fix that on the fly. That's not something that even NFL teams are good at overcoming midway through the season. But it's not good enough. I mean, I know App State is tough on, opposing rushing offenses, but it's not even that Georgia State is being able to stop them and then they just coalesce the box. I mean, their offensive linemen are just getting pushed off the ball into the running game, just straight up just being pushed directly into the running backs. The running backs have no time to, make a move or, do any sort of cut or find a hole. There's never any time because there's never any holes for them to find. And that is an issue. I could sit here and try to critique the running game, but it's not any more difficult than that.
Well, yeah, because it's like you're trained to be patient because you want to wait for those holes to develop. It's not like you're going to turn around and just say run headlong forward because you might, if you wait, you might get bottled up in the backfield, or at least try and get back the line of scrimmage, whatever, because that would be poor technique to teach those guys. I think that the thing is, and I'm generalizing here, but we've got 6 games of evidence. They've been able to have success on the ground, whether it's through a scramble or when they are going against down in distance. Like on the first drive. They get 2 runs for Rashad Amos. They go for 20 yards total. Both of them were on 2nd and 10, I believe, or 2nd down and long. And I think they caught formation. Maybe they had something where one of them ran to the edge. Maybe they just had the numbers, but it was not an expected rushing down. Basically, whenever the other team knows they're going to be trying to run the ball, Georgia State's not having success doing it. And then that speaks again to the way you're running this offense. I forget exactly what the score was at this point. Was it still, I think, a 7-0 game at this point? It's 4th and 2. You're in plus territory. I guess at some point we should discuss the Sunbelt, hosing Georgia State, but it certainly is not worth top line billing on this podcast when the game went the way it went. But they blew that call live and had no way to rectify it on the punt that was muffed, but not. So say the refs.
The only thing that I can think of, and I'm kind of stretching.
We can get into it. They said it on the broadcast, but I want to finish this first thought.
Okay, that's fine.
After that, you do get the ball back in plus territory. I think it starts at the 42. On that drive, it's a 4th and 2. It's still 7-0. At this point, it hadn't actually been that big of a gap. Georgia State got on a drive, first drive of the game. They get in the red zone. They stall out at the 11. Field goal gets blocked, kicked into the line, not very good. App State goes on a 98-yard drive a couple of times later. They score 7-0. And at that point, the yards discrepancy was not that big. It felt like both teams had a successful long drive. Only one of them paid it off. And it felt like it was still in the balance at that point. And so it's 7-0. You get the ball starting your own territory. You run the ball twice in a row with Branson Robinson to set up a 4th and 2. It was probably, other than the Amos runs on the first drive, the best you looked running the ball all game. But you go to 4th and 2 at the 34, I want to say. and you run the most obvious, like, reduced set, running back, run up the middle, and it gets dropped for a loss and it's turnover on down. And it's kind of like, you know what this team does and doesn't do well. I know you want to establish it. I know you want to be the type of team that can run the ball, especially with all the attention you pay to the running back room in the transfer portal. But it's like, that's not what this team's good at. If you're in a 4th and 2 there, run a pass play. Do anything past the sticks, and maybe you bring Cam Brown in and maybe you have a look there for him that's like a 2-point play that involves him rolling out. Stuff that we saw him do in the second half of this game to a lot of success. I don't know what the right call is. I'm not trying to be like that level of backseat coordinator, but it's like everyone knows that obvious run, everyone's crunched in, is not how this team's having success running the ball. You needed 2 yards. It wasn't even just like you needed just kind of cloud of dust and you get a yard and you move the change. It's not like 4th and inches. Like, you needed a full 2 yards. I just don't understand what the thought process is as far as that being the call. And it's kind of emblematic of, it doesn't feel like the running game is getting set up in any meaningful way. They've kind of punted on it in a way because they're running a lot of the screen game, quick stuff to the outside, which is kind of their way of running through the air, and I get that. But like, when they are trying to run the ball, I just don't really know what the idea is of what they're trying to set up. And yes, you need to be able to just run inside zone. Your base plays really well, and this team can't, but I don't know how they're trying to get to that. I don't know what they're trying to set up to make that possible. But certainly just kind of going rah, we're going to get it done on that situation. I mean, you get a touchdown there on that drive, things might reset a little bit. It didn't happen, and they left a couple of opportunities there when it was still a 7-0 game that they couldn't level it, and then that's at that point when it started eating away from them.
And to not even talk about the punt, that thing that you just said right there, you get a touchdown on that drive and level things off. That's something that I feel like this Georgia State team has continually missed over the last few weeks, where it's not even that they just can't
last 2
score.
Seasons.
That's
last
fair.
18 games.
That's fair. It's not even that they can't get in the end zone, because yes, they have certainly struggled to do that, but it feels like there has never been any sort of cohesion in momentum. Nothing is setting anything else up. Nothing is, okay, here's a play that was successful earlier, let's come out in this look and then run different action off of it, make the defense bite. No, it feels very stiff, and it feels like every single play is its own single play, and there's no like running anything off of anything. And the reason I say that is because it doesn't feel like anything that they are trying to run off of these plays is working. So it doesn't feel like anything is actually doing anything at creating momentum for this team. And you see it in the offensive struggles. You see it in being down at 17 at the half and then being down 31 and getting your 20 points or whatever afterwards. Like, you shouldn't have to get your game's worth of points when the game is already not in the balance anymore. That's not how good football teams operate.
Yeah, and I mean, it speaks to, I think, Jim Chaney was brought in as the offensive coordinator last year. This year, Hugh Jackson is promoted from within to take over. 2 guys with a lot of experience, guys that even players would have heard of. And not even just for like the law Hugh Jackson coached the winless Cleveland Browns thing, like just because his name's been around the NFL. I'm sure there are people that carried a lot with. I think that Dell McGee got the idea of how he wanted to set up his offense wrong at that base level, because I think he wanted someone who was experienced, who could trust to just kind of run that and run it the way that he had in mind of setting it up. And he wasn't thinking about college football in the age of 2025 that you need to innovate. You need to have an edge. You need to have a coach that is looking to find that thing that's going to get you an N% better than the other team and kind of attack it. And it felt very safe. It felt very that he had an idea of how he wanted it to go, and he had seen in a place like Georgia a lot of success with not that Mike Bobo, their OC now, gets a lot of hate all the time and it's not thought of as a great modern offensive coordinator. But Georgia gets away with it by and large most weeks because they just got a massive talent advantage and their playmakers make plays. And even if Georgia State was the best, most talented team in the Sun Belt, which they're not, it wouldn't be such an edge like what Georgia has. That would be overcomable or that would be enough. And it just feels like at the fundamental level of deciding how he wanted to run this, I just can't imagine him looking at this and not regretting that he didn't take a swing on a younger guy, a guy who maybe is his first time calling plays or whatever it might be, someone he had come across in his coaching career, talking to guys at clinics, even if it was someone he didn't know as well as someone he might have known like Jim Chaney. It just feels like that's where it went wrong. And it feels like as we're talking this all out, it's like, okay, you should probably just run with Cameron Brown at this point. And after the game press conference, there wasn't a lot of noteworthy things to mention, but the video's out there. I put it out on my Twitter. It's on the Thursday Night YouTube page, full 10 minutes with Dell McGee after the game. But it was asked about are you going to go with the two quarterback thing, and are you going to go with a guy? And he said something along the lines of looking back at the tape and evaluating, which I believe is the most non-committal he has been to the idea. So if you're hoping Cam Brown's going to get the ball in the future, I think you probably can take some solace in that answer, because it feels like the closest he's been to just saying, yes, we're going to go with a guy. But I just don't know if, especially at this point in the season, making that switch, if you have the right offensive mind designing the offense around a guy like Cameron Brown with the skill sets he has. And so you're kind of left just kind of wondering what the rest of the season could even look like, even if you do start to see some more success week in, week out. What level could it really get to? And, oh, by the way, now you're 1-5. I don't know if we've even mentioned that the record had left them at. We certainly even haven't mentioned the App State of it all, where you now have lost 12 in a row to this team. Haven't ever beat them before. It's a footnote in this game compared to all the rest of it. But
yeah, I mean, Georgia State is a free win for App State at this point. Until that changes.
Yeah, that's how it's been.
Yeah.
But all of this is gone poorly to the point where you're 1-5 and you have to win all but you have one game left to. I know it's going to sound crazy talking about a bowl, but that was kind of the baseline of what you're talking about is going to look like success in year 2 under Dell McGee, is making back to a bowl game, and you got to play near perfect football the rest of the way to make that happen. And we haven't seen any evidence of playing good football on a regular basis, to say nothing of perfect. And so we definitely want to come on here, because you guys are listening to us, and have the golden answer of what. Got nothing. I can't tell you anything's going to get better. And I'm sure that's what you're thinking listening to this as well. But it's we're 18 games in now. Georgia State has given up 40 in games more often than they have won games. They have given up 40 in 5 of the 18 games so far now after this game. And they've won 4 of the first 18 since Dell McGee has taken over as head coach. Enough said. Not going great.
Yeah, that's. I don't even know that there's more to really say about that. It just. The one good thing that I could come up with was, the first quarter that they had today was their first penalty-free quarter this season. That's.
Penalties not an issue. They lined up great.
Yeah.
No formations to be mad about. I think both of the penalties were on the same drive. Both of them were defensive pass interferences. One of them, I think, was a bad call, and it took away an interception. But that's neither here nor there. It was not a storyline at all. It's like I was saying earlier. There were things we thought were going to matter. Henry Bryant is hurt. Jartavius Flaune is hurt. Neither of them can go. Ian Matthews dressed, but I don't think he played a snap. You were down 3 big defensive linemen, to say nothing of other guys. It was beginning to become an issue. And yeah, there's only 1 sack, only 4 tackles for loss for 7 yards. So defensive line didn't have massive wins throughout the game. But 124 rushing yards, 3.4 yards per carry, when you were worried that maybe losing all those guys was going to lead to giving up a bunch of yards on the ground, that didn't come to fruition. Mostly kept it in check. Penalties, you kept in check. Outside of the missed field goal, special teams had a great game. Reed Chanley, his best game at Georgia State. Austin McGee downs one of the punts down at the 2. You have a muff punt that doesn't get called, and I guess this is where we can go into that, where it was ruled that the guy got blocked into the punt touching him. And so on the field, the referees call it that he was blocked into him, ergo that's a dead, or it was downed. It wasn't going to be a muff. And that is not reviewable. So no matter what, Dell McGee held up the game for a good 5 minutes trying to get them to look at it. They couldn't overturn it because that's, I guess, a judgment call on the field that cannot get overturned. And so this is a 7-0 game. It would have been 1st and goal inside the 5 for Georgia State. And I think they just misapplied the rule and got it totally wrong. And there's no recourse for getting those judgment calls wrong. Like, there isn't a way, and there's not like a incentive structure for officials to huddle and talk about it and say, yeah, we messed up. We're going to change this call ourselves. And that kind of hurt Georgia State, but it was a good play nonetheless. And there's another one, I think another 1 or 2 punts that got down pretty deep, and the missed field goal kind of stands itself, and you're 1-7 on kicks, and Dell McGee asked him after the game about it, and like, did you try and upgrade that in the offseason? Were you just going to trust the guys you had? And he was basically making a thing about NIL, and it's like, it's about money, and you got to give more. We need people to give more to bring in these players. I feel like there was a kicker out there that had, at the FCS level or whatever, like if you really wanted to go get someone, you could have made an addition. You could have challenged these guys, because I don't know that it's an ability thing. It might just be in their head right now, but you've basically cut the confidence of both these guys totally to shreds, where you could go back to Liam Rickman now, sure. I don't know that he's going to be any better than Braden McAllister's been. And it's just kind of like, that of all this stuff feels like the least solvable in the rest of the season. Just kind of like, do you keep attempting these kicks? And in that situation, it was a 4th and 10. So of course you take the field goal. It is a chip shot. Like, that's a no-brainer as far as the coaching book goes. And yet you're at the point where it's like, is it worth it? Because you can't trust them from any distance at this point.
Done. No distances. And I think the kick was kind of emblematic of how Georgia State's, place kicking operation was. The guy just kicked it too low. Just kicked it right into a App State defender's helmet.
It makes sense when you understand that he had been the long guy last year, and there was like a unspoken, like, we trust Liam more on the shorter stuff. And I think the reason is just, I think a lot of McAllister's kicks have come kind of low because he's used to that, because he's more comfortable with the longer distances, which is where you kick them lower. You have to. It's why the ones that are like 50 plus are always at risk of getting blocked so much, because you're having to kick it lower to make it. About 27 and a half minutes of just kind of talking through everything in some kind of order. I did say this at some point on Twitter, just making the joke like of me like putting on clown makeup defending this defense. There were moments where it got away from them, though how could it not? Like, how could you keep your poise for an entire 2.5 quarters when the offense just keeps letting you down time after time? But legitimately don't think that they bear much of this one. They didn't get much of a pass rush. There weren't any of those impact plays. They dropped a couple of interceptions. Obviously, Shams had the one interception taken away by the penalty that he did make the catch on, but it's like, we know what was going on there. It's like you had 2.5 quarters where the offense didn't put up a single point. And then the interception starts to drive off in plus territory. There's certainly stuff to critique there, but my attention is so many other different directions other than, they were 5 of 15 on 3rd down, and then 1 of 2 on 4th down, but like 6 of 17 on 3rd and 4th down combined. Doing your job there. There were a lot of very obvious situations where App State was looking to run the ball and they couldn't get it. It's kind of the same thing with Georgia State, but obviously didn't cost App State on the win-loss part of it. But it's like, there were some very obvious, like, we're going to do short yardage runs, and Georgia State was ready for it. As the offense was really languishing early on, it felt like it maybe was going to play out like the James Madison game did last week, because you were looking at a 7-0 game about halfway through the 3rd quarter, and it's like, all right, the defense has done their job to get them to this point. This is where you need the offense to start giving them anything, and obviously that wasn't to be until the game was pretty much out of the question. But I don't know. Certainly, if we go back and watch it, there's be stuff that sticks out, and they got picked apart over the middle of the field a good bit through the air. But like, okay, I think it pales in comparison to a lot of stuff that was going wrong for the offense.
And, despite the end result being what it was, if you just take, I know that that's not how football works, because there's a specific reason why they were able to get up to the 20 that they scored. If you just put those 20 points, 14 in the first quarter instead of the 3rd quarter, 6 in the 2nd quarter instead of the 4th quarter, Georgia State goes into halftime up 20-17, and then the third quarter happens the way that App State happened and Georgia State does not score in the second half, I think we would clearly say, okay, the offense just didn't do its job. We've been talking for 30 minutes now. What has been the most of the tone of this podcast? The offense didn't do its job. So I think the defense in totality didn't have a great day. I agree with you. I think for the half of football that the defense, the game was in the balance, the defense did play well. And you can kind of see this, no clearer than just looking at the first half drive chart. Here's the time of possessions for Georgia State's 6 first half drives. Their first one, 3 minutes and 59 seconds. Their second one, 1 minute and 50 seconds. Their third one, 2 minutes and 34 seconds. 1 minute and 19 seconds. 1 minute and 33 seconds, and then another 1 minute and 19 seconds. In what world, if you're asking your defense to be on the field for the rest of that time, and after that, are they going to sit there and, only allow another 17 points? And I know that App State got another possession because of the interception. Okay, that's fine. But, that's such a tall
But that's part
ask.
of it, too. That is, those deflating moments happen, and it's they're already down 3 scores, interception out of the half. They're starting in plus territory. They score. It's 24-0. Turn it over on downs that next drive. I think immediately, the first play was a big pass play to the tight end down the sideline. App State was already in business again, but it's kind of it's human nature, and it's Dell McGee talked about as far as the team. I'll pull him up to quote him accurately. Just kind of the thing he put it down to. Called it a very, very fragile team. We play off of emotion, we play off of momentum, and we don't seem to get momentum early. And when things kind of snowball, we don't have enough motivation from a coach's standpoint to the players, and then the players to each other to overcome negative moments. Yeah, obviously, that's one of the most fundamentally wrong things that can be going wrong with your program. But it's that is what that is. It's kind of you can't keep asking the defense to pitch an A+ game. And to your point about, we don't have to move the scores around. We can play the hypothetical game. If you make that field goal, which you're already there in business, or you score a touchdown on that drive, whatever, you get some points there, and just find another score on one of your possessions in the first half. Obviously, if we butterfly affected, you're not going to get the field position because of the punts. But just if you get points on 2 drives in the first half, with everything that went wrong, even if App State gets everything else the same way, it's a 17-10 game at half, and you get the ball to start. That is a world of difference of heading into the locker room than you're down 17-0. And yes, you get the ball to start, but it feels like you need a 70-yard play on every snap. Which you could understand why, TJ Finley starts forcing throws in those situations. Not to mention, whoever was back there was just under duress pretty early in the snap count, or pretty early in the play, a lot of the time. And again, that goes back to the run game not getting established and just getting to tee off a bit. And just individual performances are just not standing up against the pass rush. Even if they're sending blitzes, even if they're having an effective pass rusher, it's still at the end of the day your job to fight back, and you weren't seeing that. And so it all kind of feeds in on each other. Lots of stuff that has to get corrected for this to look any kind of semblance of respectable, and we're halfway through the season, and a lot of this stuff gets baked in by this point. So it's, again, hard to give you any kind of silver lining to point to. I don't think people watching this are looking for a silver lining. I'm just not trying to promise what I can't deliver.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my next point. It's just until this team can find something that they do well on offense, it's just going to continue to look like this. You're just going to have halves and quarters where you're just laying goose eggs, and in not crunch time, there's just going to be a bunch of empty calories of stats. That sounds harsh, but that's just kind of when they have put up numbers like this, that's just kind of what it's been so far this year.
And last year, you could give some credence to the idea of when Sean Elliott left, when Dell McGee took the job, it was putting him in a bad position where he had to put an entire roster together after a whole window of players that already went other places. So that's part of it, but that only lasts for last year. And the other part of it is just kind of patience is kind of earned in a way. And I just don't think there's been anything done to prove that it's going in the right direction to where you can say to fans, yeah, we took this and last year was tough and we think we're going to have something going good in the future. We're going to build this thing slowly. You still got to, in this day and age, find a reason that people can grab onto to have hope. And I think you've already lost that. You're going to have to find that over the final 6 games. And at that point of the season, I think you're still going to have people that, especially if you still end up not making a bowl game, that are not going to give you a lot of credit for the place that you've left the program heading into potentially year 3. And you look across the Sun Belt, Marshall smoked Old Dominion tonight. Smoked. Southern Miss brought in 70 new players along with Charles Huff when he came to Hattiesburg. They won 1 game last year. Them and Texas State look like probably the favorites to battle for who's going to win the Sun Belt West. Those are both year 1 coaches who did find a way. And, Tony Gibson brought in a lot of guys when that program got turned over a good bit. Some of those players following Charles Huff to Hattiesburg, all these things, I guess, tie in together in some way or another. But that was year 1. And yes, the Vanderbilt game last year was a lot of fun. Certainly feels a lot less fun now that Vanderbilt got their revenge. But they've had a more consequential game already, each of them, in Sun Belt play against conference peers than Georgia State's had in 1.5 years under Dell McGee. And the product on the field doesn't suggest that that is coming anytime soon for the Panthers. So, it is. There's times where people should have more patience, like just in general in life, in sports. But you just have to ask the question, like, what would fans, what would Charlie Cobb, what would Georgia State Athletics be waiting for at this point? I think it's a fair question.
I agree. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you, as much as there are things to like about the defense, I can't sit here and tell you that there's just something that is just going to magically turn this around next year, and I feel bad because obviously the first year was not good circumstances, like you mentioned. And, everybody was, very apologetic to Georgia State on the broadcasts last year. They definitely knew, hey, this is an opportunity. Sorry, this is one of those examples where, the college kids, they get screwed over sometimes. Sometimes coaches leave really late and it kind of messes up with, attendance and, guys who are going to be in the portal but end up not being able to go. Like, I get it, and that's fine. However, coach still coached all 12 games last year, and in some respects the 2025 team has been worse, and I don't even mean that from a talent perspective. And that
no,
is
I think the
issue.
team's more talented.
Exactly.
It is becoming. It's something I was going to throw in my piece that probably is out by the time you're watching this. Going to try and, in addition to speaking a lot of words, type some words out about this. It's starting to become noticeable the way other coaches talk about Georgia State when they're, every week you get the perfunctory press conference and, this team does this and this and we're going to have a tough challenge in our hands. A lot of the time the coaches are talking about this is a talented roster. Starting to become noticeable that that's the thing they hone in on rather than, some of these buzzwords you hear about, coaching the right way, the programs got this, that they're doing well, really respect this coaching staff and what they do. Like, a lot of focus on the talent in the roster. Starting to kind of illustrate the point that you're just laying out.
Yeah, there's still so much season left that, I'm not really trying to say anything, but at some point, the talent on the roster has to actually be talented, right? We haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and then you knew last year, like we talked about what was going to make or break this team heading into this year. Certainly something that coaches were aware of was how well the offensive line could gel, because last year it didn't gel well enough. I think it's taken a step back. You look at production.
Yeah.
The sacks are a bit better, but it might be because Zach Gibson wasn't that great at escaping sacks versus maybe what you have now with Cameron Brown having some more escapability. But the rushing numbers worse, and I don't think that the running back room got less talented. I think they would have been fine if they just run it back with Freddie Brock. But I think they lost him and they adapted and brought in some very talented running backs. They overhauled the offensive line, and a lot of the guys they targeted this year in the portal ended up being the guys they're playing. Last year they brought in some of those guys from other schools in that really condensed window when they joined, and it ended up being a lot of holdovers, like Ben Chukwuma, now in the NFL, Trevor Timmons, that ended up starting on the offensive line. It wasn't their guys, quote unquote. This year was a lot of the guys that like they seemed to do exactly what they were hoping for as far as earning those starting jobs, and the product's still been what it's been. So it's a tough sell that this is getting developed, and it's like, say you get back to just repeating last year, you're 3-9 2 years in a row. What is there to expect? It's not going to be 3-9 in 2026 based on what we've seen. I mean, the schedule is going to be easier because you're probably not going to be playing 2 P4s and a top G5 in Memphis. But like, it starts to feel a lot like maybe we've been talking about on the men's basketball side, where it's like you're seeing a lot of the same things crop up, and it's like, okay, there's another offseason coming up where you can say we're going to get the run game going, we're going to get this offensive line working. It's like, okay, what do those changes look like? And if it's another case where you're bringing in another offensive coordinator and bringing in another offensive line coach, not saying that's what's going to happen or not, just that's what happened this past offseason, then maybe it's not those guys' fault. And it's like, what are you changing? What are you rearranging that is going to actually make this better in 2026? And it feels like the answers so far through 18 games have been lacking, and we're seeing the results of that.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately where we just are with this program, and it sucks because I think there was so much positive momentum over the last couple of years, and it just has certainly stalled. That's just kind of the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the version of Georgia State everyone has maybe pretended has been all along. Like, through the last 7 years, when they've been making bowls pretty regularly, have not made the Sun Belt title, but have been a pretty competent, competitive team in this league. I think there was a lot of people still thinking of them based on their all-time win percentage, based on how the early years went poorly. But they're playing down to that stereotype again. They look like that undisciplined team that's getting blown out by conference foes, that they'd kind of age out of that. They were in a better place under Sean Elliott, where it wasn't reaching that final hurdle, clearing it, but it looked a lot better than this. And I think we knew there was a risk. It was a bad time to have to make a hire, for the same reason it's a bad time to have to bring a new roster in. And you were going to have to take a risk. And I think everyone would probably do it over, as far as people wanted Georgia State to hire someone like Dell McGee, if not literally Dell McGee, when it came time of like who's going to replace Sean Elliott. I don't think you can really change the process unless it's just about like being in that interview room and just not believing this is going to be the guy with the right vision. But I don't think people would necessarily make the choice over. It just goes to show that at the end of the day, there is that indescribable thing that's like you got to have or you don't have as a head coach. And a lot of coaches very good at the jobs they do for their whole career and aren't able to do that final job of head coach. And it feels like through 18 games, it's hard to not see that picture getting painted for Dell McGee. 4-14 record and kind of looking the way it's gone for the first 18.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have anything more to add to that. It's unfortunately the truth.
So hopefully that was coherent enough to follow along, and we kind of bounced around here or there, weaved it all together, but probably not dissimilar to how you're feeling listening to this. Still going to cover this team. Still going to try and find the answers week to week. We'll be back. Maybe there's something we see in the rewatch, catching bits and pieces of this game that stand out that are worth mentioning again, that maybe like you lean on this. I will say that the one thing in the postgame that Dell McGee mentioned is that to his eyes, they settled on a group of offensive linemen in the second half that they felt like we're going to give them the best chance going forward. So I'll have to go back and look and see who was playing in all those different series to see maybe that's going to be the group going forward, and maybe that's the answer to get some kind of stability in that group and kind of enhance it. But look, it's gone bad enough, and next week you're playing Georgia Southern. And this one matters because winning this one maybe wins you back some good fortune with some fans, even though I think it's really going to take a massive overhaul to look a lot, to make them feel a lot better about where things are at. But look, you lose this one in Statesboro, you lose this one by 21 or worse in Statesboro, don't look now, the bottom can get lower. So
I think that's it, honestly. Like I'm just going to be honest. I'm not saying that it's going to happen immediately, but You lose by 21 next week, and that's probably it. Because
Yeah,
I don't think Georgia Southern is a good team either. I think that's the one thing we haven't said. Like, yes, there are some things that App State did well coming into this game, but this was not the perennial Sun Belt favorite App State team that came into Atlanta and beat Georgia State like this. Georgia Southern is not a good football team.
But they were favored by like 2.5 by the time kickoff happened. This was supposed to be a toss-up game. I picked it as a toss-up game. I picked Georgia State to win. Obviously got that wrong. Because it felt like it should have been a lot closer. Anyway, yeah, we'll get into the Georgia Southern of it all when we get back on the podcast mics. Thank you for listening to this. Seriously, if you've made it this far in this podcast, I hope you've had some kind of beverage or something to calm yourself after a frustrating afternoon at Center Park Stadium or watching along on TV. Thank you for listening. We will continue to try to have answers for you that may not be there to be answered on the next episode of the THERSday Night Podcast. Thank you for listening to this one.